All right. Hello and happy Monday, all you marvelous humans. Welcome to Masterful Management, brought to you by Portland Cocktail Week, another round, another rally, and Kettle One Vodka. Today is sadly our last session of this season, and we are very fortunate, however, because we get to speak to Rachel Ramsey, who is the founder of Measured HR. Rachel will be discussing with us today how to build the perfect team as well as how to keep those amazing humans. And we're going to explore all the strategies to support your team through HR at every stage of the employee life cycle. There is a ton of things for us to cover, so we'll get right to it. But first, there are 4 things we ask for you to do if you are a fan of our glorious content here. Please like us on Facebook, subscribe to our channel on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, and please comment in the chat, and I will get those questions. I'll be able to ask Rachel those. It's going to be great. So without further ado, Rachel, thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
I'm doing well, Amy. How are you?
So good. So good. Tell
Awesome.
us how you are. Tell us how
Yeah.
employees are. Tell us
Uh,
everything.
I would say employees, as well as employers, they're navigating these difficult waters, right? Um, Employment, and just the world of HR right now is it's been difficult, right? In this season. So I will say that there are a lot more questions. I'm getting a lot more inquiries about, what should I do here? How should I navigate this? And that's what we're here to do, right? So I'm feeling energized that HR can support employees and employers through these crazy times in these waters. And I see this topic is so on point. I'm so glad, Mark. We're excited to get to share with you today. Um, so a little bit about who I am, right? Let's talk a little bit about who I am and why I'm even here talking with you. As Amy said, my name is Rachel Ramsey, and I'm the owner of Measured HR. And so, what I do on a daily basis is I help support restaurants, small businesses, and in any area of HR where they need it most. And so we come in, assess what's happening, and try to give them strategies to work through it, right? And so, I have been a former chef and a former pastry chef, and also a former GM. And so my perspective is very unique to those of others. I have worked in the same roles that you want to fill, right? And so a little, that's a little bit about who I was, and I've been in the industry for about 15 years doing this work. And I'm passionate about people. At the end of the day, people are what makes businesses tick, right? If you don't have people, as we're seeing in some spaces right now, you don't have a business. And so I'm passionate about people, protecting people, and also helping employers build some foundation around people, right? And people operations. And so that's what we love to do. And I've worked for some large corporations and some mid-sized fine dining groups and also some small restaurants. So we like to say we have a good eye on what's happening in all different places in the industry. Perfect. So we're gonna start. Hey, Amy.
No, I'm good. I'm adjusting myself. My apologies. I'm
No
getting close
worries.
so I can listen.
So listen in here, right? So today we're gonna talk a little bit about bolstering your business, right? And so, what bolstering really means is propping up your business. And we're going to go and talk about the entire employee life cycle. If you don't know what the employee life cycle is, that is the path that an employee takes from start to finish, right? So, from that employee getting onboarded all the way through a termination and or if it's going to be a promotion or an exit, right? Exits don't have to necessarily mean termination, but sometimes employees move on. Right. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you can support your business by supporting your people in that employee life cycle. Okay. So how number one question I get all the time is how do I get started with this, right? HR is big. HR is scary, but I'm here to tell you that HR is not scary, right? It seems that way, right? If you don't know what you're doing and if you really I think the fear comes in because you don't want to get things wrong, right? But that's what people like me are for, and that's what lawyers are for, and that's what research is for. But my number one advice to all my clients is start simply, right? We know that the subject of HR and or people is really, really broad, right? So if you start at a simple place and follow these steps that we're going to talk about today, you can start to build those foundations, right? And the foundation, the things that the foundation can be a simple start, but as you build upon that, right, that's how you get a complex business. And so again, my first point is always to start simply. Most organizations have year over year goals, right? And so what you want to do is build your HR goals into your company yearly goals. And those goals might be to expand sales. Those goals might be to add on a new location. Those goals might be to cut labor to a certain extent, right? Even cutting labor has a component of people operations in it. Right. So any of those goals for the year, if you have profit goals, anything that you're doing, you need to build in an HR component into your business. So that's how you can start simply, because we all are going to do that for our businesses. And think about people ops when you're doing that. And so again, the last thing is mastering the employee life cycle. And that's what we're going to talk about mostly today. We're going to go through each and every step, going from attraction and onboarding and all the way up into retaining and or exiting that employee properly. You might think, like I said, termination might seem like it's the worst thing in the world, but sometimes exiting an employee can lead to better opportunities for other employees, can lead to a great referral, right? If someone is exited properly, they'll say, you know what, that company really treated me well, and tell everyone else about that. Right? So you want to be careful and mindful about the entire process and how you manage your business throughout this process. All right, so
Oh,
let's go. All right, let's dig into it. Okay, so attraction. When you're attracted to someone, you want to be appealing, right? That's the thing. But I want to as employers, as managers, right, as new managers, I want you to start thinking about what makes your business attractive, right? Is it actually appealing? Are you appealing to the right type of people, right? So attracting people to join the company is definitely about your reputation, right? It's about the information that potential candidates hear about you. What are people saying about you in the industry? And how are you impacting that conversation, right? Are you posting things on social media that make sense to your brand? Are you targeting a particular group of people and saying, you know what, we need more of these people, or we need to start looking in different pools of candidates? What are you doing, and how are you making yourself an attractive employer, right? So that's the attraction process. And that's really something you start thinking about when you are recruiting, right? So right now, recruitment, if we're honest, it's really difficult to recruit good people, right? But does your talent base have access to you? Do the people that you want, so think about that. Do the people that you want to apply to your jobs have access to successfully apply? And so for if you're looking for entry level candidates, most entry level candidates are probably are going to be computer savvy, right? Do you have a text to apply? Do you have a QR code? Are you posting in areas where college students or continuing education students might be able to apply? So think about your recruitment processes, right? When you're starting to say, we need more people. A lot of times we rest on our laurels. We rest on, posting a job and just forgetting about it,
Mhm.
right? And but that is not the best way to attract and recruit the right candidates for your business, right? Um, Go ahead.
Is there
Yeah.
so because the computer world can also be a little exclusionary to some people,
Hmm.
where have you found are like the most successful places that people have tried to recruit that doesn't have to be found via the use of a laptop? We can assume that most people have a smartphone, but let's say that they didn't have that. Like,
Hmm.
how have you seen people actively engage and recruit people that don't have tech at their fingertips?
A
And
couple.
that's a real thing. So,
It is a real thing. I think what word of mouth is key there, right? And so if you empower your employees to recruit and say, "Hey, I love it here," right? And you should love it here too.
mhm,
I've seen employers give out recruitment cards, right? So it just those are it costs nothing probably,
yeah,
or 10 cents for a card, and you say, "Here, come in on this day and we're having a job fair, right? We'll be recruiting that day." So word of mouth is really it seems simple, but it's really been key, other than utilizing tech, right? And I guess I would say partnering, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But partnering with organizations that might be looking to staff, right? So there are organizations like in New York, there's Hospitality Pathways, and so these are organizations that are upskilling individuals, right? Giving them the skills and the tools to
mhm,
work in the hospitality industry. And they are looking for employers. They're looking for people to come in and say, "We will hire you." Right. And so that's another way you can use things that are outside of tech to recruit new employees.
nice.
Perfect. And then last, go ahead.
Nope, didn't see anything.
And then lastly, we're talking about recruitment, and I feel like onboarding is such a big piece of that, right? If you do not onboard your employees properly, that employee will get so disengaged within the first couple of days of employment. Think about put all the money and the resources you have put into attracting the right candidate, to recruiting the right candidate. Those are dollars spent. You might not see it all the time, but the time and the labor, etc., those are dollars spent. So if you're going to put out those type of resources, you want a return on that resource, right? And so onboarding is a way in which you can solidify that. What are you doing in the first 5, 14, 30, 60, and 90 days? What does that look like from the employee perspective, right? So this requires you to take a step back and you take off your rose colored glasses and look at your organization, right? Because from a new employee perspective, they do not see all the amazing things that you see.
Mhm,
They do not know. The experience that they're having is the true experience for them, right? And so once they walk through that process, the question really is, is your onboarding engaging, right? So do you give this new employee the type of skills that they need to do their job? Right? Do you give them the type of skills that they need to do the things beyond their job? But that means like connecting with others in the organization, right?
mhm,
Do they feel a sense of connection to the organization? How are you ensuring that? Right? So those are some of the things that you have to think about and start to put plans in place in order to move to the next step. Onboarding really is the opportunity for new employees to understand your expectations, as well as be aware of all the support and opportunities that are available to them. There are some organizations that have amazing things, but you never hear about it because why on onboarding, I was only told that this is my job and this is what I need to do, and then hop on the floor in 5 minutes. It's not the best onboarding experience, right? Not the
trial by fire is generally the way that a lot, not generally,
right.
but oftentimes the way that things work in our industry, and it's
Yeah,
really, where
yeah.
else does that happen?
All right. And what I'm saying is, we need to just shift, right, the resources and the time that we're spending probably finding a ton of new employees, right, and focus on the ones that we have, right, the ones that we have attracted. If you put enough time and energy and the resources into that process, you will see the return because you'll start to retain those employees. There was a study that said, I think employees who are exited, they make that decision within the first couple of weeks,
Hmm.
right? So they're making the decision that this is not the place for me within the first couple of weeks. That's why it's so important to make sure that you create an atmosphere that employees are going to love, that they're going to understand the expectations, and they're going to understand their resources, right?
Hmm.
Within that time frame. And so that is the first step of the employee life cycle, right? So key, right? Although other things are key, this I would say, if you put this in your back pocket and you start to move in toward the steps in in this step, then you will start to build a great foundation.
Set them up for success with the onboarding.
Come
Heard.
on, in the beginning, in the beginning.
Novel idea. My goodness.
Not new. Amy,
It's not.
not
It's really
new.
not.
Not new at all. I do not claim to be some new person telling. What I'm saying, everyone who's listening, is that these are tried and true things and steps, right? And what I'm saying is that if they are not taken, that's when you see a lot of the attrition. That's when you see a lot of people leaving, right? Once you start to build upon these steps that we're going to talk about, then you start seeing long-standing individuals who care about the company and want to stay.
Yep.
Right. So the next step we're going to chat about is learning and development. So I love something that you said, Amy. You said trial by fire. Now,
Hmm.
I can't lie. I have been a part of a lot of organizations that's just what it was. Trial by fire, hop in there. And although I will say that you learn who can withstand the heat, I will say that that is not the best way to get the most out of an individual, right?
Hmm.
To maximize an individual's potential, right? And even lifespan in your organization, right? Because what happens is a lot of those individuals get burnt out, right? And so what I have here is something I see all the time, right? Employers are seeking hourly workers who can also be the CEO. So that means you are working for minimum wage, $15 per hour, but you know every single thing, right? And I can rely upon you to do every single thing. We can't do that any
No.
longer, right? We can't do that any longer. Why are we expecting our workers to come ready with every single skill that they need to know for that job? Now, of course, core skills, yes, you when you hire, you're hiring for some core skills and those core competencies. But there's some things that you might be able to develop, right? And so you want to make sure you have engaged employees that not only who are seeking learning opportunities, right? So that is a fact that the highly engaged individuals are seeking to learn something from their employer and they're requesting that. And so if you know that they're requesting that, you want to get ahead of the curve and start to utilize learning and development, right? So it's been such an important tool in the HR world. Organizations like Hillstone, Levin, and Google, right? They invest in continuous learning. And it comes in all different forms. Some of the things that you can use are, of course, creating formal development plans, right? So for each role, having it written out, what this role means, right? The expectations of this role. And then how do you get or how do you excel at every part of it, right? So, if, for instance, if a part of your role is to be great at communication, well, how do we teach someone how to be great at communication? Right? There's ways you can teach someone those skills. And so you might take a manager who has the operational skills, right? And then you can add upon that with other layers. And then whoop, you have an amazing GM. Look at that. All right. So that's what I'm talking about when I say learning and development. Some other things that you can do is consistently promote in-house openings, right, to current employees. So what that means is if there's something open and you are looking externally, you haven't found that right person, consider developing the right person internally. You might have someone who's a rock star in a certain role. If that's so, think about what else there is. I know sometimes we get nervous about taking that employee and putting them somewhere else, but there may be more value in that, right? Because you can probably find, if it's a role, a smaller role, you might be able to find another individual to fill that role. But there are often roles that are hard to fill, and that's what we often do with hard to fill roles. Find someone internally who we can develop into that role.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that you can do is encourage lateral moves, right, as a way to grow. So everyone is looking to, go up the ladder every step, every step, every step. But some of the best learning I ever had was being kind of quite lateral, right? Staying at the same level, learning the same thing in the back of the house as the front of the house, right? And staying at that same level, that gave me a roundness, right? A development that was more round and complete, so that way, when I was ready to move to the next step, I had much more experience. So you want to start to promote that in your organization, lateral moves, right? Instead of just saying, well, the next step for you is from a manager is GM. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's on the same level. And so you can learn and develop an individual in that way. Um, and provide training, of course. I mean, in workshops regularly. This is something that we need to do. We need to develop more in our industry, I would say. Um, Providing regular training and regular workshops. As I said earlier, some of the most successful companies have a L&D department, right? And so, in addition to having an HR department, they have an L&D department. Now, if you're a small business, you might not be able to have an L&D department, but you can have an L&D person, right? You can have someone committed to training and committed to learning and development on that team, and that person potentially could toggle back and forth between back of the house, front of the house, whatever is necessary, and help support the training of individuals, right? That's another investment into your business. And last but not least, you need to help your staff members understand the path to growth. Often, we don't want to communicate what's next. So an individual leaves. They say, I didn't even know that was available to me. Right. And so if we start to make it clear and communicate the path to growth, then I think that you'll find others eager to stay within the organization and kind of get to the next step, because they know what that next step is. They know what they're working towards. They understand what that hard work, with the hard work they're already putting in, it feels like there is something tangible that I can get to the next step and I can achieve. Right. So that is not necessarily it's a mental game as well, right? We have to, working in the people ops is about understanding what drives people, right? What, getting into their psyche and understand, well, just like for me, we're performance driven, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that next, reward and recognition and benefits. But we're performance driven. That's a great segue, by the way.
It's like you've done this before. It's so weird.
But it's performance driven, right? What pushes an individual to move to the next step? Why do they want to stay with the organization? And I think rewarding, recognizing, and benefits is super duper important, particularly right now. So let's talk a little bit about this. In general, in a labor market like we're in right now, benefits are super important. But I think first we're going to talk about rewarding and recognition, right? So rewarding individuals in the organization can be kind of daunting because you really don't know what your employees want. Most people don't, right? It seems like an enigma. Getting a mug, a coffee mug that says best employee ever. does that really translate? Often it doesn't, right? It's not, it seems like a nice gesture,
Mhm.
but it doesn't really translate to what is motivating your individuals, right? And so you have to identify what the majority of your employees are motivated by. Do we want recognition, right? Sometimes just a thank you is a lot,
Yeah.
right? But does that individual want recognition by their peers, right? Because there is manager recognition, and then there is a recognition that is in front of everyone else, right?
Mhm.
What is driving those individuals, and tapping into that is, like I said, is so key. And but do your employees prefer tangible rewards, right? And that can mean bonuses,
Mhm.
that can mean that can mean gifts, that could mean gifts, right? Something that, or that could mean a day off. Like that's amazing.
Yep.
What makes sense? You have to start to understand your employee population in order to understand that. Traditional rewards and reward and recognition programs, they're not necessarily what people are looking for now. We want to modernize our approach, right? And anything that helps alleviate the workload from the individual. Right now, I believe in saving time for them and resources. That also motivates. I've actually seen some employers just say, you know what, we're going to get a temp in here. And that, in and of itself, the thoughtfulness behind that
Mhm.
has motivated them, and it felt like a reward, it felt like recognition. It certainly is recognition for what's happening, and especially the state of the business at that time, right? So really, you gotta, money money is a motivator, and that's great. But like I said, you want to really hone in on what really matters to the individual employee. um, I would say, as we grow nearer to the this just crazy year, it's important to realize that most employees have drastically different needs, right? Some families are separated by like computer screens still, right? They're still not traveling, and others have had to adapt to what's life like with remote work. There's so many things going on. um, we want to try to be as flexible as possible when we're thinking through recognition, right? Because now you have remote work employees. You don't just have employees who are working in the restaurant, right? So think through what some of those things can be, right? What is the cost of them? What is the cost of rewarding the employee? What's the cost of recognition? What's the cost of peer-to-peer recognition? And if your particular organization can do something more to support.
Mhm.
But you really need a clear strategy and a clear budget for recognizing everyone. And so know your numbers. That's the moral of the story. Know your numbers to see what you can do. I would say doing a little consistently is better than doing nothing at all, right?
Absolutely. And I would say, like, even if people are worried, if owners are worried about the cost of things that are associated
Mhm.
with benefits, there are very creative ways to do things on the very low, like even be able, like one of the things I did was have snacks in the bar for my
There we go.
team members at all times, so they
Mhm.
had like healthy things that they could have all the time, or being able to negotiate with local gyms to have, obviously this is where my brain goes right to the health stuff,
Mhm.
but like making sure that they have like low and no cost access to being able to move their bodies, or you could have, bring in a foam roller to have on hand, or things that they could use to take care of themselves. So people, I it's always like important for people to think outside of the box, because it doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg to be able to reward people. And that, obviously, like the step one is find out the motivations. What are the intrinsic and extrinsic motivating factors that actually drive your people?
For
Simple,
sure.
simple.
And that really goes right into benefits, right? When we talk about benefits for individuals, we're always thinking about, yes, medical benefits. Medical benefits are great, but every employer, A, cannot afford, right, those premiums. and B, might not have the infrastructure in place to support that process. Because that benefit administration is really daunting to many. That being said, as Amie has said, there's so much you can do outside of the world of traditional benefits, like partnering with a local gym. There's also EAP programs, which are employee assistance programs. What those do is give you resources for things that you might need on a daily basis, like childcare, right? Like mental health resources, like legal services. So benefits, although we want to, we understand that the need for medical and health, because the market is competitive right now. And what I mean by that is employers with benefits are the ones that are coming out on top. That's just reality, right?
Mhm.
That's where we are right now. And so if you have benefits, you are definitely a preferred employer. So sourcing the right benefits, we'll get to that in a second, but just in general, you can definitely have other low cost options that will supplement your benefit program. Right now, there's a organization called Oyster Sunday, and they are providing some preventative health care to individuals who or organizations that are small, right? So what they're doing is really just um, it's a collective of small businesses that
Mhm.
are joining forces, because what drives the costs in benefits is really the amount of people you have. Larger employers are get preference, and smaller employers are normally left to hold the bag. All right. And so what Oyster Sunday is doing is they are joining forces together, and a lot of restaurants are able to join in on this. And you can provide your employees with some preventative care items, right? So it can be anything from bike, like a city bike membership, up to so one time health, like a telehealth. That's what I want to
Mhm.
say. One time telehealth uh, uh, session.
Mhm.
So basically, my point in this is saying that a you have to figure out what works best for your business. But just because you are not able to provide a robust benefits program like a larger employer, it does not mean that you cannot provide something,
Mhm.
right? And the more that you can add on those free and low cost options, and there are a lot out there, the more that you can add on to that, you can certainly create a program that shows your employees that you're thoughtful, you're thinking about them and their health and the other things that matter to them. Other also, the last point on this, that you have to tap in, just like you can tap into your employees and find out what drives them. You can tap into your employee population and ask them about their benefits. There are also organizations where benefits aren't even used, right? And people are not even enrolling in them. And
Mhm.
why? That's the question. Like, why are they not enrolling? Is it too high cost? Or does it not really speak to what their needs are?
Right.
Is it, a lot of families, this doesn't make sense for us. And so it would behoove you to think about your strategy, right, on benefits, and speak to your population before even making a strategy. Because if you're going in the wrong direction, you don't want to spend money, right? And
Right.
resources are limited. So it just makes sense to bring them into the conversation before you make a final decision.
Absolutely.
Perfect, perfect. So next, we're going to talk about a little bit about progression and performance. So, you know, performance management and managing the progression of your individuals or your employees, a lot of times it just doesn't happen. That's why my question is, do I have time to do this? But I'm here to tell you that if you don't do it, it will happen. It will basically happen anyway. So what I mean by that is, if you don't manage your individuals, you don't manage your employees, they will either leave, right, or they will be in the organization creating havoc, right, or be unhappy, right. And so succession planning is one of the first things that I use, and it's a key way that I manage the performance and the progression of individuals in the organization,
Mhm.
right. So with succession planning, you as a manager can identify um, the current team, right? So the first thing is assessing the current team. What are their skill sets? What are their competencies? Where do they have areas of growth, right? And then, so those that's you're assessing those individuals in their current roles. And then the next step is thinking about, well, where do those individuals go? Right, what's their next step in that in the trajectory of their career in the organization, right? And then the last step is looking back and saying, well, if I get that person to that step, who do I bring up, who do I train, who do I develop to now fill that role, right? So it's a three-step process. First, assessment of the current individual in their current role, what their next steps look like, and then who is next in line, right? Who can fill that void, and that's what true succession planning is. It's really planning and preparing you for anyone's exit, right?
Yeah.
And and I would say that, of course, that we have individuals who are really intrinsic and valuable to our organization, but you as an employer, as a manager, can't be in the position that if that person left today, your organization and your business would fall apart.
Yeah.
That is not that's not the best place to be in, right? So if you're proactively thinking about what you should be doing is in regards to succession planning and who's up next, right? It will help you in the long run. You will never feel like that, if this person leaves, we're done. That's a horrible place to be in, and it's not ideal, of course. The next thing we're going to talk a little bit about is performance reviews. So, performance reviews are normally a very, I would say, a very structured way of checking in with your team and giving critical feedback. Now, I would say that this works for certain organizations, right? They really love a formal approach to performance check-ins, and this normally happens yearly, right? And it happens once a year, and it's normally tied to some type of promotion and or an increase, so a monetary increase. And so, if you want to use this in your in your organization, I would certainly couple it with some of the things I'm going to talk about later on, right? Because what I find is that um, that through consistent feedback is always a great way to just keep a temperature check on your individual and on your employee, right? And so performance reviews, if you're only doing it once a year, you really don't get that consistent feedback.
Mhm.
So next piece we're going to talk about are one-on-ones. And so with any of my direct reports, I always love to have one-on-ones. And so those can happen weekly or bi-weekly. But these are just informal conversations where we talk a little bit about what the specific goals and expectations are for that role, what you're working on, and things like that. I find that these conversations are always good to get just a ear on what's happening in your organization, right? And
Mhm.
so the one-on-one is certainly a way to gather the information needed for performance reviews. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the last step that you can implement are check-ins. So check-ins happen less frequently than one-on-ones. It can be quarterly, it can be monthly, whatever it is. But these are just definitely a formalized way to manage the performance. I would say that for small businesses, what I've seen work the best are quarterly check-ins, right? And
Mhm.
then coupling that with one-on-ones. For larger organizations, because you tend to be a little more spread out, you can do performance reviews, coupling that with a few check-ins at work. And the last thing that we're going to talk a little bit about is constructive counseling, which is write-ups. That's a nice way to say write-ups. But constructive counseling to me is us managing employees' performance based upon our expectations, right?
Mhm.
And so, what you need to first be clear on is what your expectations are.
Yeah.
I'm an advocate for certainly disciplinary action, progressive disciplinary action, which means step by step. Um, but I definitely want to make sure that we all understand that if we are not holding individuals accountable to something, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Right. And so progression and performance management, you need to make time for it
Mhm.
in your day-to-day life cycle. Because if not, then your employees won't really have anything to expect.
Heard
And
that.
I heard that. And so we're going to go to our last slide. Our last slide, which is retaining and offboarding. Um, of course, retaining is always our goal, but the offboarding of an individual, it does not have to be negative, right? So it says 70% of employees are unhappy with future career opportunities, right? And that doesn't bode well for engagement, morale, or employee retention. And so you know, it's really about retaining those individuals that we can, right? And if we cannot, how do we leave the organization,
Mhm.
right? So, if you take all the steps that we talked about today in the life cycle, right, you have a higher probability of retaining that individual because why you are engaging that individual. You're checking in on their morale, right? You're checking in on their well-being. You are making sure that they have a great employee experience, right? And as an employer, that's the most that you can do. But the reality is, employees still might want to leave for different opportunities. But if standardizing the offboarding process, you might have a higher chance of getting a boomerang employee. That's what we like to call them. So an employee that goes and comes back, right? That's an amazing thing. They may go out there and think that it's beautiful, the grass is greener, but it's not. And so, if you onboard and offboard, excuse me, and you standardize the processes within that, you really, really, really are gonna you're gonna have high you're gonna I am stumbling on my words. What you're going to do is really promote and or you're going to increase the likelihood of that employee coming back, right? And so the real key is how you go about that. Having a document that clearly speaks to the questions of surrounding, having what we call exit interviews,
Mhm.
right? And having a conversation that surrounds why that employee wants to leave, what could we do better in that role, and being okay with getting those answers, right? Because sometimes that might be unpleasant for us to hear. Going back to what I said earlier, we have to take off the rose-colored glasses and be okay with hearing what's not working in our organization. But that is how we get to the retaining and offboarding piece, and having the high likelihood of someone coming back. Um, so those have been the steps of the employee life cycle.
Mhm.
And I really hope that you have learned something today. I know we might have some questions, but if even if we don't get to all the questions, I would still love for everyone to reach out. And if you have questions, you can reach out to me on Instagram or on my website.
Yes. All right. Those ways to contact you are being thrown up right now.
Perfect.
We don't have any questions in right now, but know that everybody, you are able to reach out to Rachel at her handles that are up here right now. Rachel, thank you so much for being here with us today and closing out our magnificent masterful management programming for this session. We are going to jump off now, but I want to send thank you to everybody that watched us. If you enjoyed this class, please smash that like or love button and show some love in the comments. If you want to see more of the masterful management classes like this one, please follow Portland Cocktail Week on Facebook, which is facebook.com/PDXCW, or our YouTube channel at Portland Cocktail Week. Same thing, youtube.com/PDXCW. We're also on PDXCW on Instagram, so you can find out what's coming up next there. Once again, thank you so much, Rachel, for being here with us
Thank
today. And
you.
thank you, everybody, for joining
Thanks,
in.
Amie.
Yay! Everybody have a great day.